Shwmai a croeso cynnes, and welcome to the What's Your Story podcast. I'm James Owen, a Welsh filmmaker and storyteller, and I'm passionate about sharing stories. This podcast is all about business owners sharing their journey, and we'll be speaking with directors, entrepreneurs and creatives from all across Wales to learn from their experiences. We believe everyone has a story to tell. What's your story? Shwmai a croeso I What's Your Story, and I'm very excited to learn some history here today. And history is all about the past, and it's in fact the story about the past, the facts of the past. And I'm excited to unpack a bit of history from a recent trip that I went on holiday. But here in the studio today, we have somebody who lives in Carmarthen. He's an author, a historian, a musician. He wears many hats. And I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Wyn Thomas with me today for What's Your Story. Diolch am dod. Thank you, Wyn.
Diolch yn fawr i chi, James.
It's great to have you here, and you are one of few people who have been on my hit list, because lots of people ask to come on the podcast, and I welcome guests to come on to talk about their stories. But yeah, you are one of many few that I reached out and invited you on, because I really wanted to use this platform as a place for you to share your story. And I think your story is really important in the story of Wales itself and the history we're going to unpack. But before I break into that story about my family holiday last year, I just love for the listeners and for those who are watching, just get a flavour of what you do day to day. What does a typical week look like for you, Wyn?
Oh gosh, well, I'm an early riser, so I like to get up, and I work freelance in history and, as you kindly pointed out, music and broadcasting. So I'm researching stories for my children's history series at the moment, which is great because I fell in love with history at a very early age, 4, 5, 6, that sort of age. Music as well, so I'm recording music. So my day is practicing, getting my sort of notes and my lyrics exactly as I want them to sound, and then doing history and keeping myself fit and focused on what's coming next, really.
Great. And I want to go straight into the reason I invited you on. So what are we now, 2025? So last year, 2024, in the summer, I think it was August, me and my family, along with my wife and my in-laws and brother and sister-in-law, all of us, plus my dog, we all went to North Wales. First time I've ever sort of visited North Wales. We do lots of work across South West Wales, London, Stori Cymru. You know, we do travel, but we've never really had the opportunity to explore North Wales, and decided to go on a family holiday. And we stayed in a little Airbnb, which is about 10 minutes from Bala itself, a Welsh town. And we had a great time, really enjoyed. It was just so nice to chill out. And this is something I'm trying to implement now, because I've realised in the sort of business world, lots of people go away in August. So it's better to go away ourselves in August when nobody else is working. So that's what we're trying to do on more tradition, me and Amy. And yeah, we went last year. We had a great holiday. I found some really cool places we explored. We went to... where are all the places we went? We went to Llandudno, we went to Portmeirion, Betws y Coed, stunning, all these cool places. And of course, we were in Bala, so we popped into Bala a few times throughout our time. And even went in for a dip in what I thought was Bala Lake, and I've been told by somebody from Blaenau Festiniog that, in fact, it was Llyntegid, I think. Llyntegid. And one of the places I wanted to visit was Capel Celyn, or Llyn Celyn, isn't it? The name of the lake.
Yeah.
And yeah, we went for a drive, and I think we were driving through it, going from one location to the next. And we passed this lake. It's enormous, this reservoir. It's absolutely huge. Stunning, mind. It is a real beautiful location. And what dawned on me is what I learned as a child in school. Yeah. When I was in I don't know, I can't remember if it was primary school or when I was in Ysgol Ystrad and comprehensive. This is something we were taught as part of Welsh history about the story of Capel Celyn. And this lake in North Wales, as beautiful as it is, and the trees and the greenery is a stunning vista. But beneath the surface of the water was once a community. And this was and is Capel, Celyn. So at the bottom of this lake is a chapel, is a school. And yeah, as a child, I was taught the story of the Tryweryn Valley. And you might see in Wales, across many places, cofiwch Tryweryn, those famous words, which is a reminder of the story of Capel Tryweryn. And yeah, to physically go there, right? I didn't even stop. I didn't pull up to... we didn't really have time, but just even drive past and see this lake. It was there was just something tingling, my spine tingling, goosebumps, because just to see that this community were evicted from their own home to provide Liverpool water. That's essentially the summary of it all. And I just think, should this happen in today's Wales, I don't think it would happen. And that's what I came across. A documentary I watched online where you were being interviewed by a YouTuber who was making a film. And yeah, I reached out to you and wanted to learn more about the history itself, because I've come across many people who have maybe relocated to the area here in Llanelli, even people from Wales. And what's more shocking is lots of people who were born and raised in Wales don't know about the story of Tryweryn. And yeah, I'd love to hear a bit about your experience. And you've written a book, and you're a big champion in this area of history, of Welsh history. And to start the conversation, but sharing my experience of going on this family holiday, which we had a great time. It was fantastic. But to actually visit this lake, it was incredible in a scary and awe almost about it all, to know that this once was a community, and that's something so important. I think the story of this can never be lost, and it's something that I'd love to share, and not for me as someone who's a passionate Welshman, not for me to bash an Englishman over the head and go, you stole our land and all. There's probably all those things we could look at, right? But just to teach people a part of history.
Yes,
right?
Of course. Yeah. No, I totally agree, and I can absolutely understand why being there would have led to that sort of shiver down the spine, James, because I've been... Part of my research is to visit Celyn, and it has the same effect on me, and always did have. But I always felt that the subject hadn't been given the correct sort of, if you like, academic scrutiny and consideration which I felt it deserved. I grew up hearing about the flooding of Cwm Tryweryn, but I didn't really know that much about it, in a sense. So I started taking it all back one stage further. I fell in love with history as a very young boy, 5, 6, 7. Just something about this subject which drew me in, which attracted me. So then you're learning about world history, British history, and then Welsh history, arriving at the flooding of Cwm Tryweryn. And I thought, this story hasn't been told with the fullness it deserves, I felt. So I spent 20 years looking at why it happened, the political climate of the day. This is 3 days before Christmas, in 1957, when the people in Capel Celyn are reading on the front page of their edition of the Liverpool Daily Post that Liverpool planned to drown the valley. So what a shock for them. 3 days before Christmas as well, So it's a very emotive subject in Wales. It's very important. It's seismic. It led to change, I believe. Through the course of the research, you can see why it led to such feelings of anger. Because you've got December 1955, it's then going through the judicial process, leading to the most important vote, really, is the second reading of the bill, 3rd of July 1957. And by a majority of 49, the bill is passed. Now, that's not huge. So there was opposition, even expressed by English MPs. But crucially, there are 36 Welsh MPs at this point, not one of whom votes in support of the bill, and which presumably reflected the opposition to the bill as held by the Welsh electorate. So irrespective of political colours, all Welsh MPs vote against it, or they abstain, or they stay away, and yet it's passed. And it's passed because there are more English MPs than Welsh MPs. And for one reason and another, sympathetic with Liverpool, being another English constituency and wondering if they're going to be in a similar situation in the years to come. So we'll support each other in order to get reservoirs constructed. They support Liverpool. But this leads to anger, of course, in Wales, because people think, well, where's our voice then? We've expressed our democratic opposition in the only seat and the place available to us, which is Parliament, and it's been ignored. So this makes people realise, well, how vulnerable Wales is politically and culturally. So I think this begins to turn the wheels towards what we call devolution and the Welsh Assembly and the Senedd. But it takes a long time, James, But it's a fascinating period of history, and it's been a pleasure to research it.
It's crazy, and as you've unpacked there, the timelines and the dates, this was actually passed in Parliament, in UK Parliament. Yeah. I can't believe it. I wouldn't be able to imagine the anger I would feel if I heard that in the press as someone living in Llanelli, something be decided in Parliament of such significance. It's incredible, and you put the nail on the head there. And I'm glad to hear that all Welsh MPs voted against or abstained. Yeah, because that's really positive in itself. Yeah, because I think it would have been. It wouldn't have been great if some of them were to support it. Well, I mean, why would you, right? But even just on that alone, for the people of Wales and the MPs who are representing Wales in Parliament, not even that as a group in size could influence that decision.
No, it's true. There was one Welsh MP, David Llywelyn, Cardiff North, Conservative, who did voice support for the bill, but didn't vote. So whether or not he was told by senior Tory officials, no, you do not vote, you just stay away. But he was the only one vocal in his support for the bill. But, we need to look at why again. I mean, this is again seen as, sort of a big brother. This is imperious Liverpool councillors, really, who see sort of an area of Wales which, well, so what? There's only 55, 70 people living there. We've done it before. We created Llynfernwy 100 or 80 years earlier. There hadn't been any opposition then, or very little. So what has changed?
So this has happened before?
Yeah, Liverpool has got Llynfernwy, and it was receiving 48 million gallons of water from Llynfernwy alone. It now claims in the early 1950s, leading up to 1955, that it would need 65 million gallons of water, in addition to what they're getting from Llynfernwy and other sources. So this is the great question. Why do they need 65 million gallons of water every day? Well, they claim it's in order to attract employment to Liverpool and Merseyside, set up factories and so on, which is true. It's always been an issue of employment on Merseyside and Liverpool. But also there's the slum clearance policy. Now they need the money to get rid of the slums, which are near to the Mersey, in order to move the community to areas outside the city centre and put them in high-rise buildings and all the rest of it, which is seen as progressive at the time. So somewhat I wouldn't say in sympathy with Liverpool necessarily, but as a historian who tries to look at things from a balanced perspective, I've given that side of it very much prominence as well in the book. So Liverpool are doing this. I think what fueled it isn't so much colonialism, although I'm sure it was, but it's more to do with the fact that this is to do with capitalism. Making money, the new Jerusalem, the new Britain in the post-war era. So this is part of that policy, I think. Nonetheless, there is, by reading the book and reading the discussions in Liverpool council meetings and so on, there does seem to exist this rather imperious attitude about Wales is there really to provide for us, irrespective of the fact that there are 70 people living there and have done for generations. So what? We can just move them. They can move and start elsewhere. So that then leads to the idea of compensation. Another mistake was they should have been compensated far better than they were, I think. So
was there any compensation?
Yeah, there was compensation. And when you look at the figures, and I looked at them from a 1950 sort of 6-7 perspective, and then you put that into a system where it gives the figure of today, and you think, well, that's not too bad. That's quite reasonable. But then when you look at it in more detail, you think, what can you actually do with that? You've lost your farm. Startup costs are going to be huge. not to mention the emotional costs of it all again. So when it was seen as the entire project cost £90 million at the time, which is a vast amount of money, the amount that the people being most directly affected received by way of compensation was measly, really. So that again has led to this sense of anger. Not to mention Liverpool's ridiculous decision to have this stylized opening ceremony in October 1965, which just descends into chaos. And they want this 45-minute ceremony, thinking it's going to be like Llynfernwy was 80 years earlier, where, unbelievably, you have something like Ifaner, the flag, saying that this is Wales's proud contribution to the British Empire. Now, Ifaner is a nationalist-leaning newspaper, really, for a better way of putting it. But yet, 80 years later, you see scenes of real protest at the opening, with cars are damaged and people being dragged off the road to stop the cars from Liverpool, and the dignitaries getting down to the unveiling ceremony. It's quite a sight.
This happened in Capel,
Yeah.
Celyn.
Yeah.
What?
October the 21st, 1965. And I go into great detail in the book because I wanted those memories. And as a historian, as we spoke a little earlier, I see it as an honour. It's a privilege for me to sit there and sit back and listen to people recount important events from their lives and offer a balanced perspective. So I wanted the attitude of the dignitaries, how they felt arriving, expecting this to be a grand civic occasion, which exemplified the municipal splendour of Liverpool and its great prowess, when in fact it just descends into a farce. It's over within 3 minutes. And I wanted those protesters, I wanted the voice of the protesters, and they come through loud and clear in the book. So what has happened? Well, Wales has changed. Llynfernwy in 1880 and Celyn in 1965 represent two very different Wales. And Wales is part of this age of protest. You see protests across the Western world at the time. The civil rights movement in America, for instance. All these things are impacting on what's going on in Wales, as we see. And probably, which is why it's so important today. Because people said, well, where do we go then? We have no voice. The only voice we do have is completely being ignored. What is to stop another authority in England doing exactly the same thing? So it represented the sort of political vulnerability and nakedness of Wales, I think. So out of what was a very difficult situation and clearly an emotional situation, I would argue that a lot of good came out of it. It led to the wheels of change turning towards greater political autonomy for Wales. And also it led to this artistic expression, which has led to songs and poems and art.
Mawhid.
There we are. It's all part of the same thing, really.
So those two significant events you mentioned, obviously, the one, the anchor of this conversation being Celyn, and Llynfernwy, previously.
Yeah.
So what's changed in Wales? Because I guess your case and argument, obviously, there's the acknowledgement of what happened and the tragedy and horror that there was, but I think what you're saying there and what I'm getting is that there is opportunity from this for a better Wales.
Now there would have been. Now I like to believe that this has led to a better Wales, a more confident Wales, if you like, is how I end the book. But if you look at one of the reasons for why Llynfernwy doesn't attract the same degree of opposition is because there were so many Welsh-speaking communities at the time. 1880, the removal of one didn't represent a particular negative step as far as Wales was concerned. However, if you look at Wales in the 1950s, you have rural depopulation, young people moving away for work, which then leads to a threat to the language, to the culture. So this is impacting again on why there's the feeling that the Wales that we love is being lost, and the flooding of Cwm Tryweryn really exemplifies that. So I think it's. But as I like to say, a lot of good came out of it. It was a difficult time, but it led to change, James. We see the creation of the Minister for Wales, Secretary of State for Wales in 1964. You have the DVLA move into Swansea in 1965. The Welsh Language Act is passed in 1967. You've got the Royal Mint moves to Llantrysant in 1968. These are seen as significant symbols of state, if you like. So it leads to this idea, well, okay, are these decisions being taken to make Wales believe that, Wales rightfully belongs in the family of British nations, or are these decisions being taken to stymie the growth of political Welsh nationalism, which is what's happening in the 1960s? Gwynfor Evans winning Carmarthen in July 1966 and so on. And so Tryweryn leads to change, and I like to think it was positive.
Tryweryn leads to change. Cofiwch Tryweryn, that phrase that is often used for lots of campaigns and protesting now, right? Yes. Which I think in some cases, rightly or wrongly, I've seen more locally, there's a school in Llanelli called Hail Goffa, and there's a sign being graffitied on a wall, Cofiwch Hail Goffa, which is that nod and link to to change, I guess, which can only be a good thing. But Cofiwch Tryweryn, because there's a lot of, and I don't know personally a lot about Welsh politics, and because going back to the history, and I don't know if these are things you've covered in the book, but a lot of the protesting things were politically charged. And you've got the likes of, Cofiwch Tryweryn was almost the start of a national movement. So was this Cofiwch Tryweryn, because this is something I learned in school, and you've got the wall, right?
Yeah.
The infamous wall, which I don't believe is in North Wales. Yeah?
Yeah, near Aberystwyth.
Near Aberystwyth.
Yeah.
So where does that come from? The whole Cofiwch Tryweryn, because I don't think it was something that was done in 1960s, was it?
Well, it was.
It was?
Yeah. It was written on the wall by Mike Stevens, the writer. And you have to say, as a piece of publicity, it is brilliant.
It's fantastic.
It's fantastic. And the colour, everything is so visual, it's so impactful. It's probably more potent as a symbol than Celyn itself, actually.
Yes,
I
agree.
I think more people go and visit the stone now in Llanrhystud than probably even go to Celyn. Because it's so visceral, it's very impactful. It's brilliant. And you would pay people a fortune to come up with something as clever as that, And it's endured. And it will endure, And so it's a powerful piece of art, modern art, which symbolises everything and not just in Wales, of course. We see them now in the Falklands, we see them in Chicago, if not elsewhere, Australia, New Zealand. As I say, I concentrate on Liverpool's reasons. Let's take the emotion out of it and see, yes, there's a reason for this. We understand the emotion as to why it happened. Will it happen again? No. For political reasons, it will never happen again. I mean, you can even see the demonstrations towards people coming over and settling in Park Estrada here, in the Hotel Estrada, and the impact that leads to change. So the expense, the cost of these things is so huge. This was part of that reservoir construction program of the post-war period, which I touched on. Even by the end of the 1960s, you see a change in government attitude. This is too much of a hot potato. It causes too many problems. There has to be better ways. However, as we now hit climate change, and we see the impact of that year on year, really, will that lead to more reservoirs being constructed? I mention again in the book, in the conclusion of the book, well, okay, but let's have discussion about this. There didn't have to be a Welsh-speaking community moved in order to construct a reservoir, and I touch on that in the book. More than feasible alternatives were suggested by Welsh opposition figures who said, if Liverpool has a problem, we'll help you to address that problem. What about this valley just down the road? You'll have all the water you need from there. They'd studied the figures anyway, and everybody questioned his 65 million gallons a day and had very good reason to, because even at the point where Celyn is opened in October 1965, Liverpool don't need 65 million gallons of water, and they haven't ever since.
Yeah.
So it was a complete waste of time in that sense. But nonetheless, this idea that the Welsh were opposed, well, yes, but they did try and offer alternative suggestions to Liverpool, and for one reason and another, they just seemed fixated with Cwm Tryweryn. So that's an important part of the story as well. I think another important part of the story is, if I'm totally honest, having spoken to people, and part of my research is how united the community was as well. And there's been a suggestion that some within the community were probably happier to move on than the legend has suggested, who saw it as an opportunity to move and so on. So people have fixated with the idea of people being, figuratively speaking, dragged from their homes and all the rest of it, kicking and screaming. I think there's some question mark as to whether or not that is altogether true. Altogether true. There certainly was people who had farmed there for years and were very sad to leave. And you see the deaths of people. And 18 people off the top of my head would appear to have passed away prematurely, who had farmed there, huge emotional attachment to these farms and these areas. Well, they must have had a terrible impact on them. Other members of the community perhaps saw it more as an opportunity to move and start again. So again, you get into the intricacies of history and the research, and very often, if not always, another story emerges. And that was one of them for me as well. So
that's really interesting, because that would be my impression that, none of these people wanted to move, and they would have been dragged from their homes and the schools and all of these things. But yeah, I'm intrigued to know. So the Welsh gave Liverpool, the council, whoever is the lead the lead decision maker in this process, there were alternatives put in front of them. Why do you think then the decision was fixated on Cwm Tryweryn?
Because, and fixated appears to be the word, they saw this valley as perfect for what they wanted, which is as much water as possible for the least cost. All the minerals they needed in order to build the reservoir in the Tryweryn Valley were there. You have a body of clay, a bed of clay, there's rock underneath, it's shaped perfectly. The amount of rainfall it receives every year. Now, all these natural resources means that the exorbitant costs of bringing these things in are prevented. They're already there. So you dig up the rock, you construct it, and then you lay on top of the rock a seal of clay, which is also within the valley. So the costs are minimal. They're huge anyway, but in real terms, they're low. And Liverpool realised, by looking at the geology of the area, this was perfect for them. 65 million gallons of water a day, again, is really the fixation. We need this figure. It was suggested they could share with Manchester. No, we want a reservoir of our own, and we want this figure met of 65 million gallons a day. They put figures forward which suggest by the mid-80s they're going to need them. However, even when they're moving people out, and the population of Liverpool falls, and the heavy industry which is being prophesied is going to happen fails to occur. So the population begins to fall. Heavy industry, the great boom doesn't materialize anyway. So they don't need anywhere near 65 million gallons of water, So it's ill-conceived in that sense.
So you don't believe it was truly an attack on us as a nation and our culture and our identity?
I don't think so. Not really. I think at the time, if you need to look at it really through the eyes of the post-war generation, really, this new Jerusalem attitude, which is in Britain at the time. Cities are decimated through the bombings and the Blitz. The money has to come from somewhere. So Liverpool City Council, main sponsors of the bill, they're providing this idea of how much this is going to cost. So they can meet some of the cost, and then central government provides the rest. So this is where the money's coming from to do it. But going back to the idea of it being imperious, it is hard not to feel, and I spoke to Lord Peter Brooke about this, and the importance of Lord Peter Brooke is his father was the Minister for Welsh Affairs, which was the office before it became the Secretary of State for Wales. Now, he's there for two reasons, or he's got two posts. He's the Minister for Welsh Affairs on the one hand, but he's also the Minister for Housing and Local Government on the other. And his loyalty is towards the housing of local government, because that is part of his construction of reservoirs and homes and all the rest of it. So the voice that we have in Parliament, Henry Brooke, is speaking up in Parliament about the need to flood this valley to construct a reservoir. So it's hard not, and even Peter Brooke, when I spoke to him as part of my research, said, I can see why this was done with, why the Welsh are angry, There was an unnecessary, unduly, how did he express it? Unduly imperious attitude, which would have led to feelings of frustration and resentment, and ultimately political change. You see the voting pattern for Welsh nationalism, certainly the rise in Welsh national consciousness. And then you see groups emerge again. So you have the rise of Plaid Cymru and Gwynfor Evans winning the Carmarthen seat. So politically, Wales is doing better. But you also have Cymdeithas i'r Iaith Gymraeg, which is like the cultural wing. So you see more interest in the Welsh language. You have the Free Wales Army, which is like the propaganda wing, and it engages the international media in a quite brilliant fashion, it has to be said, with outlandish claims, unfortunately. So on the one hand, that's impressive. On the other hand, it probably undermines the message, really. But you also have a militant group called Militant yn Cymru, Movement for the Defence of Wales, and they undertake a bombing campaign, which is what my second book is about. The man who led this bombing campaign is a British Army officer, incredibly, called John Jenkins. And John's reasons for doing it is proud Welshman, this can never happen again. And he's got the perfect disguise of being a British Army officer. He's in the dental corps. So he's hidden. He's hiding in plain sight, to be honest. So it's all the three books that I've written just capture the three different angles of this story and bring it, and the trilogy sort of captures it all, really.
Wow, fantastic. So tell me in summary, all those books, you've got the three, and in summary, what each one tackles in terms of the overall story.
Well, thank you, James. It's a good question, James, because the first one, Hands Off Wales, really looks at at a broad view of it, really. It covers Tryweryn, obviously, and then it leads up to the royal investiture, July the 1st, 1969, in Carnarvon, when Prince Charles is given the title, or awarded the title, of Prince of Wales. Now, while there are some in Wales who support that and agree with that, there are certainly some others who don't. And this opposition is expressed vocally, but it's also expressed with people like John Jenkins setting bombs. And it's the 1960s. I was born at the end of 1967, and I was born into a very enigmatic period of Welsh history. It was just fascinating, growing up, hearing about the bombings, and wondering why. My father was a policeman, so he was attached to the story in that regard as well, because he was out on these pipelines with his torch looking for devices, So I grew up having a certain understanding of it. So Hands Off Wales looks at Wales from the post-war period in a broad way. It obviously mentions all the important factors, but the second book then looks at John Jenkins and why he led this bombing campaign, leaving me then to realise that actually there's a human story and there's the judicial process of the bill, which I hadn't really looked on with the justification which I felt it needed. So that then became the third book, Tryweryn A New Dawn, ?
Tryweryn A New Dawn. I love the title of that, Tryweryn A New Dawn. And in a new age of post-industrial Wales, do we have a voice?
I think we have a voice. I personally would like to see the natural resources of Wales put in the hands of the Senedd. Even today, under the constitutional arrangement we have today, Westminster is still in control of Welsh water, which I find staggering after all the protests. And
you mean the water we own, or the company, Welsh Water?
Yeah, it should be
both.
Both. It should be owned by Wales. It should be owned by the Senedd, and we should own all our natural resources.
Is Welsh Water a private company?
Yeah, I think it. Well, I'm not sure what it is now. It's changed a little bit. Dŵr Cymru. I think it's. Goodness, I think it owns Celyn, but I don't think it owns the water, somewhat confusingly. There seems to be something or other. But, and I would imagine the best thing to do is to look at our natural resources, which after the people of Wales, I would say is its greatest commodity anyway, and they should be in the hands of the Senedd, as a way of going forward. And we need to be inclusive, we need to be confident, we need to be, forward-looking as a nation, and this is what I try to get across in my work as well, is I can understand the frustration, but I don't think it's healthy for a nation to pin its identity on past grievances. learn the lessons of history, of course, but then look at them as a way of moving forward. And I'm writing a children's series as well, and I touch on the need, because I fell in love with children, with history at such a young age. I think one of the joys of the books has been the response of people saying, "Gosh, I didn't know that. Thank you ever so much." And I've said, "Well, I'm just a conduit. I'm talking to people, I'm reading files, and then I'm trying to write them in an engaging way. So it's readable and it's attractive and it maintains your attention." Because I fell in love with history at a young age, and I'm trying to write children's stories now, which I hope. Well, I'd be thrilled if children sort of said, "I in 20 years' time, I fell in love with history because of those stories you wrote."
Children's books for history, that seems a bit bizarre for me, because you'd think maybe history is something very intellectual and for adults. So who are these books targeting in terms of age then?
Well,
these children's books,
I would say, broadly speaking, 6 to 10.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I most love about history is it's about people. It's about their experiences, their lives, their memories. Well, that's true of any age, So I try and get children to say, "Look, your life is important. The people around you who've shaped your life and make it what it is. We all have a story to tell. Everybody's life is a book, as my mother-in-law would say, and she's absolutely correct. Doesn't matter who you speak to, everybody's got memories, regrets, things they're proud of, things they're not so proud of. Everything makes that person who they are, including history, the world they're growing up in at the time, and what's led to that world being the world it is today. So I'm trying to tap into those. And my first story is about Rosa Parks, the lady on the bus in Alabama in 1955, a black lady who was asked to move, can you believe, and sit in a seat because there wasn't enough space for white people to sit down. Unbelievable. This is living memory, really. And so I'm trying to say to children, look, treat people with the respect that you would like to be treated with. And I think that comes through in the history as well. Is about being balanced and about being fair. And I think as long as people do that and approach history with that mindset, the lessons are there to be learned, to improve all our lives, really. And I try and get that across if I can, but with the folk music I write as well, James,
Yeah, that's good. Gosh, touching on that, for me as a Christian, the biblical values
of course,
what Jesus teaches, to treat others how you want to be treated, right? That's also so evident and so simple, and
it's probably the most important of the Christian teachings, actually, for me, James.
Oh, massively.
Yeah, of all the of course, you can touch on this aspect of the Bible teaching and this message and so on. I think the thing that I come back to time and time again is treat unto others as you would wish to be treated yourself. And I think that underpins everything. How you'll speak to a lady or gentleman tonight in the shop when I shop on the way home. It's all those interactions which should be done with courtesy and respect. And I probably come through from listening to Bob Dylan as a trill, blowing in the wind and all this. The civil rights movement that he's talking about, the intricacies of human interaction, that type of thing. Well, it feeds into the history and the music.
And the music, and we're touching on that. But yeah, it's crazy to go backtrack a bit. It's crazy to think that, the natural resources in Wales aren't something that we own.
No.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Wales and England, the relationship we have, is very different to that of Scotland and England, right?
Yeah.
We are our own country. We have our own parliament, but then I just find some things confusing. Oh, what? They make that decision, not the Senedd? And
absolutely.
It's all a bit complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's complicated and it's also a bit disheartening, to be honest. There's so much. I hate the idea of the Senedd being seen as a talking shop, but for me, I would like to see more power given to the Senedd. I'd like to see those decisions put in the hands of the Welsh people. Not to say at this stage I think we're ready for independence necessarily, unless I can become convinced otherwise. But I'd love to see more power given to the Senedd, certainly in relation to the natural resources of Wales. And I think, again, as an historian, and you see the wealth that has gone from Wales to feed England / the British Empire, it's extraordinary. In terms of slate and coal and steel and water. How wealthy Wales would have been as a nation, or could be today, certainly would have been, had those resources remained in Wales and sold from Wales to the world.
Yeah, we'd be in a very different position,
We'd
wouldn't we?
well, the situation would be entirely different. Entirely
Because
different.
that argument of independence, well, a big part of that is economic, isn't it?
It is.
It's, for me as a resident and a taxpayer in Wales, financially, I don't think the numbers stack up for us to be independent from a financial perspective. But then, like you said, if we owned, gosh, all that, we look at the Middle East.
Yeah.
All these companies that got all this oil and
Well, indeed.
and they were so wealthy. And
Yeah.
who knows
Well-
what position Wales could have been in had we had control on our own resources.
Well, particularly water being comparable with oil, really. I mean, that was our oil and water. It would have made Wales very rich indeed. But there again, the situation was this was the British Empire at the time, and we were feeding into the British Empire. But how's that money come back? Now, some people would argue we're being propped up by the south of England. Well, the whole of the UK is being propped up by the south of England, southeast of England. So that's the breadbasket, to quote Boris Johnson. And we should be providing water from Wales for free for the breadbasket of the UK, which is the southeast of England. That's where the wealth is. To listen to people like Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
But you look at it from a historical point of view, it's a different situation, James.
It is.
Very different situation.
It is. It is. Music.
Yeah,
On that other creative outlet, you're a
Yeah,
writer, but also music. Just briefly, I'm intrigued to know what inspires your writing. Do you feed your history into your writing?
Yeah, I do. And I feed everything into my writing, really, into my songwriting, whether that be faith, a love of language. So I read a lot. I'm very much into Thomas Hardy and so things. I think basically I fell in love with people like Bob Dylan and John Lennon at a young age. I just love the creativity of it. You're touching on the intricacies of human relationships, and the joy of that, but how difficult that can be, obviously, as well. So I think I touch on life, really, James, and I think that's what drew me to folk music in particular. So I have a go. I woke up this morning. It's not easy. You're pouring your creative efforts into something that you enjoy. I've had lovely feedback from people, and if you forgive me for saying so, I woke up this morning to a wonderful endorsement on my YouTube video for the song "Watch and Smile," which is the lead song from the album, from Laurie Kay, who's a legend.
I wouldn't know who that is, but please tell me.
Well, she was the last. She was a legendary rock journalist, and she was the last person to interview John Lennon. This was on the afternoon of December the 8th, 1980, and tragically, of course, as we all know, John Lennon was murdered 11 p.m. that night. But Laurie Kay was the last person to interview John Lennon, and then I woke up. We corresponded. And then I woke up to this wonderful message complimenting my guitar playing and the singing.
Wow.
So, and she's interviewed everybody, Macca, Mick Jagger, and I thought, oh my gosh, So just when you think, you can almost, in all our lives, I think sometimes you think, what am I doing?
This guitarist in Carmarthen's at a convent. Wow. That's incredible.
It's brilliant. It's there on YouTube to be seen, and it gives you such a lift. And some of the people I had working with me on the album, like Aled Richards from Llanelli, who was in Catatonia.
Oh, Aled Richards.
Yeah,
Wow.
provides the drums, and Pete Hurley, Van Morrison's bass player, Jeff Downs, who co-wrote Video Killed the Radio Star, which most people are familiar with. He plays keyboards. So the people I managed to draw together in order to write the album or play on the album with me really was brilliant. So I like to think what I've done is sincere. It's from the heart. It's genuine. It's not there to make me a fortune. I don't think it's ever going to do that. But I'm trying to say, it's not about making money. As long as I'm getting by and I'm comfortable, then as far as I'm concerned, I'm successful.
Absolutely. And for you to, put in your creativity into an outlet, and whether that's profitable, either way, if you're enjoying it and it's giving you success, right? Because we could define success.
Yes.
You could define it as, I think people always think about money, don't they? When you think about success.
Yeah.
For me, right? I am successful.
Yes, of
Because
course.
my definition of success would be doing something I love and getting paid to do that. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Well.
Do I earn as much money as I used to 10 years ago in sales? No, I don't. But, I've never been happier.
Well.
So success in itself is can be a very subjective definition. But, for you to have that creative outlet of creating music, having fun and, covering your costs, great, so be it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been lucky to have the, small pension from my time working in mental health as well. So I've had a good working life. 25 years in the care sector was fantastic. Learned such a lot about people, about the world, about myself. But then to have that as a platform to go into writing history and writing music, it's been a joy.
We haven't touched on that, have we? But no, it's great, and it's good for you to acknowledge that, because I think that your experience working in care for such a long time has probably really influenced the curiosity of your history and wanting to know the truth and the facts to help. And part of history is all the story of the past, but it influences the now and the future.
Absolutely, James. Absolutely.
So it's great. It's great to hear that, and I'd love to hear what is next. What do you, for you who have written already a couple of books and you've got the children's books, where do you see the future for you when in your work?
I'd like to do more of the same, really, James. I think the writing of the big sort of deeply analytical history books, I think I'm going to leave that with the trilogy. They took 20 years of my life, 25 years of my life, really. So I think that's enough. I'm proud of them, that leave them where they are, really, and just get the feedback, which has been, as I say, positive, which has been great. I'd love to do more with the music. So I've recorded a medley of 8 songs last week, and we've got a YouTube video being filmed next week, which will then be uploaded by end of September. So it's basically promoting the songs which will be on the 3rd album. And then the children's stories are being polished in order to hit the Christmas market. So they've got to be back with a publisher in the next couple of weeks. So busy, but happy with it. And I totally share your idea of success being as you defined it. It's about being happy with where you are and getting by, doing with your day what makes you smile. Is success for me.
Yeah, good, and love that. I love that, and it's great to hear about the books and the satisfaction that, do you know what, you've as a creative myself, I find that hard to relate to, because I'm often maybe making a film and thinking, I might come back to that, I could make that better, but to be happy and pleased with your finished works, that's quite a good place to get to, because I don't know if I could ever write a book and think, it's done. I think I'll always probably keep working on it.
Well, to be honest, I totally understand that as well. Because you always think I could have written that better. That's not quite right, and you find the occasional typo, but that's just life. It can't undermine the product.
That's good. Yeah. And you also, part of your journey was teaching and lecturing, so that's something you often do. You do talks on the history and the books themselves?
Yeah, I taught at Swansea University for a year, and that was great. I'd just left the care sector then, so that was academic year 2016-17. So to stand in front of youngsters, 18, young, enthusiastic, was fantastic, and try again, inspire. And they were already inspired to a point, and they were there to read history. So they already understood what history was. So we shared ideas, we shared discussion points, and, I learned from them as much as I hope they learned from me. But that was good. I enjoyed that side of it. But I also enjoy the Q&As that I do, and I do like book festivals and so on, where you might have an audience who are asking questions, and it gets you fired up, and it's like, and you dig into that little book in the back of your mind, and I know where that is, and so I enjoy the Q&A and the discussion events. And I love playing music, as I say. I love playing music with either as a solo artist or with other musicians, just seeing the joy on their faces, like you just lose yourself in, that's irreplaceable as well,
That's good.
And I think underpinning it all, as I say, faith and regular exercise. As I nearly ran into you the other day, literally. I was in Carmarthen. I was in a Reagan. I was there for some event,
And all of a sudden then, I was walking to it again, walking the car park. I just seen this man running towards me, topless, thinking, what the hell is he doing? And he was out of breath. James, podcast. I said, sure, I win. Yeah, great. Divine intervention, who knows?
Who knows?
We ask all our guests on What's Your Story to really share with our audience who are people that have inspired them or influenced them, and people they'd love to hear from, even if it is fictional. I'd love to ask you that, Wyn. If you could hear anyone's story, and you could sit and have a conversation with them for an hour, whose story might you want to hear?
Oh, gosh, James, that's almost impossible to answer. One person or a few people?
Oh,
do you know?
I say one person, but if you can give me some quick fire, it could be John Jenkins. I don't know. It could be anyone.
Well, John Jenkins was, as I say, that's his story.
Would you be like, what the hell were you doing?
Well, it's all in the book. I question his motives. I'd love to be sat on a table with Owain Glyndŵr, John Lennon, Bob Dylan.
Owain Glyndŵr?
Yeah,
wow.
No. That would be an interesting story, wouldn't it? How close we came.
The conquering England.
Yeah, we did well. And nobody ever found him. He was never betrayed, which is important. I mean, there's a significant sum on his head. So he was never captured, and importantly, never betrayed, James. So that was a time where things could have changed for Wales, really. But what came as a result of that were, the most awful legislation against the people of Wales, really, which led to the subjugation and all the rest of it, but added to what had already begun, obviously. But nonetheless, I think to speak to Owain Glyndŵr and share a bottle of red with him and say, okay, how close did we come?
Brynu y maw hyd.
Do.
In the words of David Iwan. Yes, we're still here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still with you. I have lots of English friends. It's all good.
Yeah, no, I have too. And it's not about that. I try and get that across in the books.
Yeah, of course.
It's not about what I try and get away from this them and us thing. You know what I mean? It's about the human family, really. But I happened to be born in Wales, and I would spend 20. I was again fortunate to do 20 years, I should say, 20 months traveling. And it's been brilliant. What I've learned about other people's and seeing how other people live around the world. But it also made me realise how special Wales is, and our own little special place in the world is. So
it is a special place, isn't it?
It is.
Wyn, diolch I ti am dod. Thank you so much for coming in. And if those want to reach out, they want to buy your book, they want to listen to your music, where's the best place for them to learn more about you?
Probably the website, www.drwynthomas.com, and all the socials. I seem to be a reasonably strong profile on them. So just put Wyn Thomas, Dr. Wyn Thomas in the search engine, and you'll see me grinning back.
AI will find it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure, James.
For sharing your own story. And I've learned so much about Cwm Tryweryn. And I hope those who are listening and watching really have listened attentively to the history, because that is a story I think should never be forgotten.
Yes.
For the good and for the bad, because out of that there was opportunity.
Yeah.
And thankfully now we can hold on to the past, can't we?
Indeed.
We can be bitter.
Yeah.
However, there is, we do live in a better Wales.
Yeah.
And I hope that one day we can, hopefully celebrate that we have total control of our land, our assets and all those things, because we deserve to. It's our land, isn't it?
Yes.
And it'd be great to see that. But thank you so much for sharing your insight and sharing your story. Diolch i ti.
Diolch yn fawr i chi, James.